The sequel to 2015's cult classic Dying Light sparked a pendulum swing that brought a once champion studio to its knees, and split a united fanbase right down the middle. Their overambition and failure to meet the expectations they created for themselves being the blow that at the time may have struck them dead. With a bit of hope, Dying Light the Beast forecasts a return to form for Techland, and as of writing this has rekindled the trust of a community aching for a reason to believe again. Yet owing in part to its genesis as an expansion for Dying Light 2, its tentative nature makes it feel like more of a course correction than a full-blooded third entry in the series. Techland may be standing tall once again, but it seems they've yet to take that first true step forward.
Hands up. Slowly.
Let's talk the meat and potatoes first, which is the beating heart of, well, every game, but especially a Dying Light game. To preface, I played this in co-op with one other person. I have very little to say about it here. Everything is better with friends, and this game does not buck that trend. If you're familiar with this series, you'll know what to expect. It's gonna be more of the same in solo and co-op. If you're not, think Mirror's Edge meets Dead Island sprinkled with a little bit of Far Cry, an open world zombie game with parkour that often teeters on the edge of survival horror, which is an angle I do wish they'd lean into more. You won't escape the open world checklist trope here unfortunately, but it's thankfully undercut by gameplay that'll take far more tedium to get old. Melee is visceral, and cutting down fodder is never tiring, with hit deformation as accurate and as brutal as it is here. I'd even go as far as to say fighting bigger and more resilient enemies isn't comparable as a result. The combat is as strong as it'll ever be when you're not wailing on one enemy for too long. As a shooter, Dying Light is still a little clunky feeling, but definitely a world above its predecessors. Techland has gotten a little better at designing boss fights, but frustratingly, their difficulty hinges on how many other enemies they can call into the arena, and they all do that. A reliance on numbers has always been a red flag for me in fights like these. I'm generally okay with the difficulty in other areas. It was hard when it needed to be. The volatiles that were off-cycle in Dying Light 2 are beefcakes here. The Knight is back, and they are relentless if you're caught with your pants down. Other than avoiding these volatiles, stealth is solid if a bit of an afterthought in places. There are no aerial takedowns, so some of the verticality offered by parkour is diminished, and any other takedown is a little one note. Overall, there isn't a whole lot of encouragement in the way of taking things slow and silent. To be clear, stealth isn't quite as sterile as I make it out to be. When it is mandatory, it's intense. Enemy encounters are complemented by an inner beast mode that lets you tap into the drive, the power, the hunger of a volatile, and turn almost anything into chaff for you to just devour. It's not free, you've got to put in the work, the hours to raise Kyle Crane's little blood pressure gauge to use it. There's an entirely new skill tree to labor away at, with beast points you get from special infected variants called chimeras after tying off and, eating like 6 meals a day, just chicken and broccoli, mate. The combat-focused skills you'll pick up along the way are fun to use and feel like a nice mid-combat encounter break to keep things fresh. It can, however, feel rudimentary at times, not quite derivative, but a tad similar to its contemporaries, like Spartan Rage and God of War. The addition of skills that enhance movement and parkour is puzzling to me alongside the limited uptime of the beast mode. I only ended up using them once or twice, very near the end of the game, and only because I wanted to. Either there needed to be a better use case for these abilities, or the uptime should have been increased, as well as the per use cost of combat skills to keep it balanced, of course. Beast mode is a great addition to the arsenal, and even if a little underdeveloped, it was never not fun to play around with. I won't say parkour has never felt better, but it's a damn good compromise between Dying Light 1 and 2's respective philosophies. Gone are the days of Aiden floating through the air like a twink in the wind, and gone is most of the jank in the original. I played with the jump type set to lowered for a more grounded experience, no pun intended, and besides the early hours of the game where I had a whopping 5 to 6 inch vertical, I mean, amazing. I always felt that with the right movement I could pretty quickly scale any obstacle. The grappling hook is back, and it feels great. This time around though, we don't have a central loop to make us feel like Spider-Man. The closest we get to that is in Old Town, which is immeasurably smaller and more restrictive in that respect. Now before you get your pitchforks and torches out, Old Town in any other context is one of the best parkour playgrounds I've ever had the pleasure of exploring. It was crafted so meticulously. Every little detail is tailored to provide you with the means to get anywhere as fast and as flashy as you'll ever need to be. Rocketing through an open window and plowing through an interior takes me back to Paris in Assassin's Creed Unity. Old Town would flourish in the hands of old Ubisoft. The rest of the map is not quite as dense and doesn't really cater to parkour. If you're heading out of town, you best take a car. Which car, you say? Well, there's only one you'll ever need, because it's the only one that works. A 4x4, the likes of which you have never seen before. By 4. A truck that somehow survived the apocalypse but will break down on contact with a toenail. With the fuel efficiency of a paraplegic in a Flintmobile, our 4x4 with the turning circle of a square is perfect for escaping those pesky volatiles. On a serious note, I actually love the way these cars feel to drive. They feel weighty, like a big hunk of metal, yet they handle surprisingly well. Very often in games that aren't big on driving do the vehicles feel like driving, I don't know, Oobleck, and I commend Techland for taking the time to make them really fun to drive. Its gas economy is pretty bad, but luckily siphoning gas from other people is less frowned upon here in Castor Woods. And I didn't lie when I said they break pretty easily either. They do, but half the population here apparently drove the same car, so it isn't really grueling to find a replacement. In truth, if not for the lack of any upgrade system or car customization, I wouldn't mind driving the same car around everywhere. But other than a paint job or two, they don't let you customize the car in any transformative way. That comes as a real surprise considering how well received the buggies were in Dying Light the following. Accounting for nothing else, that system straight up ported over here would be an easy net positive. This addition could have made the intentional lack of fast travel a little less frustrating too. Setting aside your means of travel, the world you traverse is impressively well drafted. Old Town, of course, remains the highlight, but every location has little nooks and crannies to peek into, and like all Dying Light games, secrets and Easter eggs abound. Yes, EXP caliber is in this one too. They've done well enough to provide enough activity to keep exploration fresh and varied. Main quests will tie into major side quests that tie into smaller activities. This dynamic helps keep the flow of exploration and hurries it away from feeling like a checklist. There are military convoys littered around that conveniently restock themselves after a while, and any emergent gameplay is limited to enemy behavior and a small collection of random events. That being said, a surprising iteration on the survivor needs help thing is that sometimes bandits can pretend they need help to ambush you, and that makes a nice change of pace from risking your life to save someone else's for what, like a granola bar or a piece of duct tape? You might find a treasure map during a side quest and spend the next 20 minutes figuring out that B2 doesn't actually mean B2 on the map for some reason, or run out of materials before a crucial fight and have to sneak your way around sleepers in a dark zone. I must admit though, I thought the dark zones would progress in difficulty, but they remained very, very easy throughout. I don't think going at night is a requirement anymore either. Not once did I see a real volatile in one. As soon as you realize you can craft a Molotov or two and clear out the entire building, they become trivial and as a result far less engaging. This, among other things, only reinforces my desire for them to lean hard into the survival horror aspect for how much I enjoy it when they do. Techland's identity crisis was more apparent in Dying Light 2, but it still occasionally rears its head here. The world flip-flops between feeling static and torn between genres at times. In fact, as good as the gameplay loop is on its face, and trust me, it is fantastic, the game seems to suffer from a pretty big progression issue. More specifically, it doesn't really have much progression at all, nothing beyond what we've already experienced anyway. Your weapons hardly evolve, weapon mods don't yield variety, just a few different status effects. For most of the game, weapon variety as a whole is lacking. Legendary variants of guns are simple reskins with a bigger number attached to them. These weapons feel great, don't get me wrong. Combat remains as visceral as I said with every single one, but it feels like weapon variety has been an afterthought for a while. Your tools are varied and interesting enough. They all have a job and they do them well. Nothing reinvents the wheel here, but you'll definitely enjoy using them. This and any healing items you need will make up the bulk of your crafting. You might want a specific weapon here and there, but materials will be spent in droves making bandages, knives, grenades, you name it. Traps are a little underutilized in this game. You really have to make them effective, and when you do, they rule, but that makes it all the more disappointing that they take a back seat in this one. While it is fun to play Dress to Impress with Kyle, the clothing offers little in the way of gameplay, and we're limited to a very small selection of outfits. Though I am happy I had a few options, and the addition of transmog was a welcome boon to optimizing what little benefit the system had. I have a suspicion that a few important aspects of this game's intended progression were cut to meet deadlines, perhaps. At least volatile nests were. There is only one, maybe two in the game, and they are strictly in-mission activities. However, there are still a few volatile nests in the game world that seem very hastily hidden from the player. In fact, this game even told me I'd found a volatile nest in a way that seemed to suggest I could explore or destroy it, which was a little confusing. We ended up going back to it a few times to see if it finally unlocked. To close out this section, I need to reassure you that I genuinely enjoyed this game, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to frame it a little differently for you. I played this game in co-op, as you know, with my brother. I don't even think he'd heard of Dying Light before I suggested we play this game. Put yourself in his shoes. We have seen all of this before, and some of us might need more to justify the investment, and that is valid, but he hasn't. This is all new to him. So sure, we are retreading old ground, but it's damn good ground. And when it all comes together, it is a satisfying symphony of brutality that only Dying Light can deliver. That is why we keep coming back. For too long have we suffered the audacity of corporation after corporation reassuring us that their game runs at 4K 60 FPS, super duper ray tracing cool lighting mode, only to discover that it's capable of such things because of DLSS 6.0 on Performance Ultra with a healthy dash of 25 AI interpolated frames between each real frame. Oh, it just runs like a dream. Guys, look, it takes 30 seconds for my input to register. Gone are those days, and Dying Light the Beast is here to usher us into a new age where upscaling and frame generation are quality of life additions and not lifelines for games. Oh, Borderlands 4 released only a week before Dying Light the Beast? What good news! Putting aside the horrid new reality of video game optimization, Techland has knocked it out of the park here. At the very least, in delivering a game that performs well right out of the box. Look, my rig is definitely overkill for most games. Nonetheless, I was able to get a native 4K running at around 60 to 70 frames per second, give or take a few in different situations. Now, I'm a spoiled little brat and I want more. Well, that's what upscaling is supposed to be for, and that's what it delivers here. DLSS on its quality setting nets me anywhere between 90 to 110 frames per second, and I am more than happy with that. Keeping that in mind, I have to make the caveat that I had a big problem with microstutter. For those who aren't aware, microstutter is an irregular delay between rendered frames that can essentially make our perceived frame rate much lower than what is actually being delivered. If one frame takes 10 milliseconds, another takes 40, and another takes 15, our eyes register that as uneven motion, which can make even the highest of frame rates feel like Bloodborne on the base PS4. For me, this manifested whenever my frames were unstable at all. Whether they went up or down, it didn't matter. The only way I could remedy this was to set a frame rate cap I'd rarely go below. That was 80 for me. I'm lucky it was still that high. A really weird occurrence worth noting is that sometimes in places I'd expect a drop or two, my frame rate would instead rise above the cap I set, and the microstutter would break free and contaminate my gameplay. It was an awful problem to have, but in comparison to other titles, I'm glad it was all I had to deal with. Dying Light the Beast does run exceptionally well, and I do believe that they've taken the time to optimize it beyond what we would normally expect. That being said, I think we need to be a little honest with ourselves. This is due in part to the way it looks. Don't mistake me, I'm not saying the game looks bad by any metric, but it doesn't exactly try to innovate visually, and that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, it's just an honest observation. I'm actually grateful that it looks the way it does. Besides some ugly screen space shadows and a lack of ray-traced reflections or global illumination, it has all I need to immerse myself in a world. Baked lighting is often seen as primitive, and in comparison to modern technology, it is, but it has a use case, and that is here in its interiors. I am a sucker for good lighting, and there are some really beautifully and intentionally lit interiors that emphasize the atmosphere and shine a literal light on some solid environmental storytelling. Everyone and their mother wants the best lighting technology in the best places, and I admire the restraint of Techland to recognize the strengths of baked lighting and to weave it pretty flawlessly with strong dynamic lighting in the outdoor settings. Some solid high-resolution textures set the stage for an attention to detail in environment design that at times rivals even the best of games. Nature overgrown infuses the architecture and spills onto the streets. Faded frescoes line their facades and remark on a culture we never get to see. And the last echo of civilization lines the thoroughfare. Old Town is cluttered and busy in the best of ways. It is beautiful, and if it weren't for the apocalypse, I'd love to live in this fictional little paradise. The draw distance is customizable. I would not advise having it any higher than 150 out of 300, and within the limits of that recommendation, it looks pretty damn good. It could work on their LODs for trees a little. It doesn't take a hard look to see that they're all the same model, but that's mostly a non-issue. There isn't enough verticality for that to detract from the visuals. The game's UI is serviceable. It's Dying Light as it's always been, except it's a little less creative this time around, maybe a little more sterile. They are playing it more safe in that department. I did say that this game doesn't try to innovate visually, and you know, upon further inspection, I might have been lying. The gore in this game is immaculate. There's no denying the masterwork on display here. Hit deformation has never been better. Bones puncture flesh, chests cave in, jaws hang loose, and innards spill out. What they have accomplished here is beyond impressive. As morbid as it sounds, killing has never looked better. It is immensely satisfying to see such accurate visual feedback when clobbering a zombie, and the impact animations are direction specific too. Now, animations as a whole didn't really receive the same treatment. Not that they needed to, necessarily, but if you've seen Dying Light 2, you've seen Dying Light the Beast, there's not much to say on that front. Well, there is one thing. If you are planning on playing co-op, be warned. They have not updated the way other players are animated since 2015, it looks like. You know how people have modded Cyberpunk 2077 to allow third person? And that the animations are borderline terrifying? Yeah, it looks exactly like that. I mean, holy shit, that is the worst, most unintentionally hilarious crawling animation I have ever seen. It is giving sneaky little hobbitses, if you know what I mean. While we're being negative, we may as well segue over to discussing how insanely glitchy this game is. It is Ubisoft, sometimes even Bethesda glitchy. Take your pick. There are bugs that restrict your co-op partner's name to the top left corner of the screen for some reason, bugs that slingshot you to the moon, and bugs that do whatever this is.
Oh yeah, keep doing that.
Yeah! They were never obnoxious enough to ruin the game for either of us, but Techland has made this one wildly unpredictable. I'm not sure what type of Lanjol beef noodle code they let slip through the cracks here, but something was not right. What they did get right this time around is voice acting for the most part. The raw voice acting itself is much better than both the original and its sequel. The newer additions to the cast, especially the side characters, bring much needed emotion to what has always been pretty uninspired. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I wasn't all that hot on Crane's voice acting, or perhaps it was how he was directed maybe. He's always pissy and angry at things. He does everything begrudgingly and not in like a steroid rage, oh I'm so angry kind of way, which would make sense. It's more in a petulant teenager kind of way, which is grating. Otherwise the voice direction is really solid. Cutscene direction is better than it used to be, if only with the departure from restricting cutscenes to a first-person perspective, but it's never been and still isn't anything to write home about. The way the game sounds as a package, with the occasional overplayed sound effect, is great, no complaints. I seldom see it mentioned anywhere, but the wind sounds are wonderfully done. Complemented by the cries of rusted metal and trembling leaves, the visual and audible emphasis on wind really elevates an already impressive soundscape. While we are talking audio, the soundtrack is good, great in a few areas, and there is one track, the Safe Zone track, that I love to bits. Otherwise, it serves its purpose more than competently and was a joy to have accompanying the world they've created. You're not going to be hunting for these tracks on Spotify and finding terribly overproduced recreations, nor is it going to detract from anything already established. Rounding this all off, Dying Light the Beast does play it safe, admittedly in both gameplay and presentation, but it makes a point of doing what it's always done well as good as it possibly can, and perhaps considering the response, that's all we're really asking for.
But I swear, if I had the chance to do just one thing, I would kill the bastard who's behind all this.
Look, we as a community kinda need to face the music here. Techland has never really been able to deliver a memorable narrative, and I didn't expect any surprises here. I'd love to say I was wrong. I wasn't. It may not stoop as low as Stay Human, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of The Following, being the best narrative I think they've ever written. It ends up being a meandering, generic revenge story with twists and turns you can eyeball with the blindfold. The Following's bold conclusion directly ties in with Kyle Crane's new digs as the Beast. After escaping Haran and effectively causing the apocalypse, Kyle Crane is captured by the Baron and experimented on. He is tortured for years. Spike and a friend do their best to break him free, but are unsuccessful. We get a brief scene of them failing miserably and then don't see them until the end of the game. Spike, who was apparently like a brother to Kyle after also being underutilized in Dying Light, is hardly present here. So for all intents and purposes, this is a new story with a new Bond villain to hunt. With the help of a stranger, Olivia, he is freed from the clutches of the Baron and unleashed into Caster Woods, a picturesque European valley nestled snugly between mountain ranges. Unsurprisingly, Kyle he's a mad guy and a very angry boy. Don't experiment on me, he says, I'll beat you up if you dare. Olivia says the Baron must be stopped. He obviously agrees because the Baron made him very sad and angry at everything, even helping people. She says, we need to kill a bunch of big scary zombies and take their blood so you can fight him. That's a quote. That's it. Between that and the final confrontation, you'll spend your time doing some menial work for the inhabitants of Caster Woods and get your super cool big narrative constantly undercut by far better written side quests. Yes, the side quests outshine Kyle Crane's story in every single way. For one, they are written far better, they are written bolder, they don't shy away from the nitty-gritty of living in the end of the world. They relish in humanity, its squalor, and its divinity. Where the central narrative is big, silly, and bombastic, the side quests are grounded, emotional, and rational. They are everything that Techland should reserve for the story it wants to tell everyone, not only the people willing to do extra content. For two, the characters are more colorful. They take risks in the moral palette they allow these people. Lydia is boring, and her temperament is a tired trope. Starchild is an intriguing take on the archetype of a dying man trying to understand what's killing him, and where to direct his hurt and pain. For a reason I cannot ever begin to comprehend, Techland insists on reserving any personality for the people you aren't required to interact with. It's baffling how consistently every side character blew their main counterparts out of the water. Lastly, and most importantly, the side content delivers better gameplay. That is inconceivable to me. The disconnect is so absolute that entirely different teams within this studio must develop main and side content respectively. It is just, I have no words. To close out this short and not quite sweet segment, this game does offer a serviceable story if you expect nothing more. The real offense is the contrast that plagued every minute of my playthrough. It is a damn shame that the story we're required to follow paints itself so deliberately by the numbers. Even more so when the finest tales are told in the places some won't even bother to look. Hey, if you're still with me, I'm James, and this is TheWaffleIron. I like to rate my games a little differently, like waffles hot off the iron from raw right on through to crispy, golden perfection. And if the bite is right, maybe a dash of syrup. Now, despite the unfortunate tone of that final chapter, I'd like to reel you back in and remind you of the two before it, where I vehemently praised a litany of crucial gears in the clockwork of a good and sometimes great video game. Dying Light the Beast is an arrow aimed straight for the heart of players who missed how the original made them feel. It is everything that Dying Light was and more. And had we not been promised an elevation of the formula in the lead up to Dying Light 2, that sentiment might echo all the louder. But we were, and it doesn't. I like this game a lot, but if I allow my mind to wander, I see all the things it could have been. I think though, for all its faults, it can be no less than fluffy.